Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Echad Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Echad Baruch Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Leolam Vaed Baruch Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed Yay day to day day to day to day to day Yay day 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 Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bochim Lashem
have a minion. We don't have a minion. Yeah. Does the guitar count?
Yeah, we don't need a minion.
In the Cantor world, does the guitar count?
Yeah.
It does? Yeah? No?
Yes.
It does? Okay, good. Yeah, we're good. Okay. You wanna begin, Cantor? Hi, Cantor. Hi, Cantor. What's the להתחיל?
Okay, we start.
Yeah.
Okay.
With
Okay, we start with the... You can start. Okay, we start with the first nigun for Shabbat. We're going to start with our guitar. I'm going to try to teach you and then try to, I'll sing one time and then you're going to repeat, okay?
For this, you can just do the nigun. For this, you can just do the nigun.
Okay.
Just, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good.
With the guitar. Im ha-guitar. Just
Okay.
as you usually do. Yeah.
Okay.
We're just starting.
Lai 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 lai. Let's try one more time together. Lai 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 lai. One more time again. Lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai. Again. Lai 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 lai. From the beginning. Lai 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 lai. Again. Lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai. Now, even warm up now, a little faster. Lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai. Lai 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 lai.
Good. Well, we can all go home now, right? Actually, we know we've been doing this for several weeks. I think how many sessions had we had up to now? 5? This is number 6. Yeah. So we had up to 5. This is our 6th, and we took a break for a couple of weeks. So we know we're just like everything else in life. It has a rhythm, and we broke the rhythm. So I sort of anticipated that it might take us a little bit while to get started again, but here we are. Thank you for all of you who showed up and for all of you who are joining us online. And thank you to Cantor and thank you to Matthew who helped to make all this possible, obviously. And thank you also to Laurel and Anita who helped to, and Erdley who helped to set up the refreshments in the back. So as you might have noticed, we began with a slightly different style of singing than what we usually begin with. And this style of singing just has a melody. It just has a melody. It has no words to it. It's sort of it has a certain nature to it. It's kind of a short rhythmic melody with no words. Does anyone know what that is known as in terms of Jewish liturgy or the repertoire of what you might hear in a Jewish worship service? Does anyone have any idea what those are called? I'll be honest with you, before I went to rabbinical school, I had no idea myself, not a clue. So it's actually called what? What's it called?
Nigun.
A nigun. So everyone say that. A nigun. And, usually the niguns, they do sometimes, occasionally, they have names to them, but they're really not known by their names. I mean, they might in particular have a name, and when it has a name, it's usually associated with the lyricist who created the rhythm or the melody. It's not known by any sort of deeper thematic element for the most part. I guess there's one or two that may be exceptions to that, but in general, it's just a category called a nigun, and anything that falls in there is a nigun. So you might say, oh, it's a nigun, it's a nigun, it's a nigun, and they don't necessarily have subtitles beyond that. Whereas, the Shema has a name to it, the Baruch Hu has a name to it. The Amidah has a name to it. The names are co-associated with the language and the themes of the prayers. These are intentionally just melodies. And they come from somewhere. They emanate from somewhere. This evening, we're going to focus a little bit on how they emerged into our repertoire as Jewish music. Because if you went back into any Reform or conservative, or even, I would say, most Orthodox communities, until pretty much the 1970s or 80s, you would not find them. They are relatively recent to the landscape, and that's also not just true here, but it's also true in Israel. So how did they come about, and where did they emerge? And this, we turn now to perhaps one of the associated ways where it really became much more pronounced in the cultural existence to what would be considered sort of like the larger domain, meaning the non-ultra-Orthodox or even secular or non-observant Jews. And here you have it. You have the playbill for Ish Chasid Haya, which means once there was a chassid. This is actually, believe it or not, an actual Broadway play that was produced first in Israel. And in Israel, it was widely acclaimed and widely viewed and received, probably more so disproportionately, actually believe it, than any Broadway play in the United States as a percentage of people knowing it. So think of what's the most famous Broadway play? Anybody? I'm not sure any of these are accurate, but okay, we all have our different opinions of widely known plays, and have any of you, how many of you have actually seen, let's say, Cats? Raise your hand if you've seen Cats. Okay, South Pacific. Oh, okay, so maybe South Pacific might be. Yeah, right, exactly, they're revivals, absolutely. And Les Mis, who's seen Les Mis? See, I thought, right, okay, right. It's not, and it's good that sometimes we have strongly held opinions about that. Yeah, well, not everyone has the $800 to go see it, but we've seen it on the television, right? We've seen it on the television. In any case, believe it or not, 1 out of every 3 Israelis has actually seen Ish Chasid Haya, which is a pretty big representation of the market if you think about it. 1 out of every 3. I don't know if that's 1 out of every 3. What do you think? Is it 1 out of every 3 adults, or you think it's 1 out of every 3 Israelis? What do you think?
Yeah,
probably adults. Probably adults. Huh?
Did you see it?
Have you seen it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. Betach, of course.
How many times?
I saw it at least once in a real show, but this was also they show on TV beside that. But
Now,
no, I didn't play, but I sang few songs from this show. Really? Yeah, I sing, like I perform some of the songs from this show.
Oh, I believe you.
Ish Hasidaya.
not in the play,
Not on the play.
not in the show, separately.
Oh,
Well, because we're going to get to that. We're going to get to it. Yeah, yeah.
Also in his
No, go back a little bit. Go back a little bit. All right. So you see how it says Ish Hasid Haya, once there was a Chassid? I have never seen the play. I never even heard of the play. I didn't really think it existed. It did actually, by the way, make its way to Broadway itself, and it actually ran for 4 months. And the creator of the piece is a guy named Don Almagor. Don Almagor, and he's an Israeli playwright, and he is well known for taking, in Israel he's well known, for taking your traditional Broadway scores or plays and translating them and making them into Israeli productions. That's his shtick. This is an app, and he's done it for over 600 plays, okay? So talk about prolific. But what's that? Oh, speak louder, I think. It's okay, yeah. No, you're good. Yeah. So anyways, the translation here is once there was a chassid. So of course I decided to do some research because I thought I would be talking about this a little bit. And I was Googling and I was researching. I spent a good amount of time doing this until Cantor said it's known by another name in English. It's also known as Only Fools Are Sad. And then when he said that, I was like, I've heard of Only Fools Are Sad. That one I've heard of. But as you can see, the Ish Chasid Haya doesn't translate to once there was a chassid. So I don't know how they got, I guess maybe they thought that it wouldn't be markable in the United States maybe as once there was a chassid. So Only Fools Are Sad, it sounds like something that would be a little bit more marketable, right? A little bit more easily heard. Okay, so now we can go to the next slide. So does anyone recognize who that is? Golda Meir, right? First woman prime minister of Israel, and also born in America. And when she had in 1971, she actually had a viewing of this with other leaders in the Jewish community, and she said to the people who are the Israelis putting on the show, she says, get to know young people in America. So many Jews have forgotten what Hasidism was all about, but seeing your faces, meaning the people that are expressing themselves in this play, they will come to understand what Hasidism is all about. And you don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to be a great scholar to catch on to the joy and the strength of those people of Hasidism. So what happens is that there's a couple of different things that occur sociologically. But what happens is that through this play, there is a style, a form that is previously foreign to Jews. Meaning, like, even if you aren't a regular Shabbat goer, even if you don't generally come into a sanctuary space, you generally know the Kaddish, you've heard of the Shema, and you know that Jews sort of share words as part of prayer, that's part of the Jewish tradition, right? That's what we do. We offer words. To think that, wait, there's this whole other way of connecting to the divine in worship other than through prayers, through a nigun, was totally unheard of. And so one reason that Hasidism broke through in terms of, not Hasidism, but the melodies of Hasidism, the niguns, is because they emerged through this play, and people heard it, and they're like, wow, what is that? And then it breathed life from that. That's part of it. Part of it also, though, the literature doesn't really express this, but this is definitely something that happened sociologically on the grander scale, but prior to and I can't help but believe that it also impacted the development of this style of music, which is this: that in the the play comes out in 1969. Is there anything else that occurred around that era that was of significance to the Jewish people? Woodstock, okay. That's definitely of significance to the Jewish people, I agree. Anything else? Summer of Love. To the Jewish people. The 6-Day War, right. They remember, you know, performing at Woodstock, serving this. 67, right, 67. So what happens after 67, before 67, in the general culture, especially in the United States, but even in Israel, there was a hesitation to be outwardly expressed with your Judaism. Meaning, the idea of being proud and outwardly Jewish was still something that was frowned upon, in the sense that Israel as a state, even the concept of Zionism, was still something that Jews had to adjust to. And they were considered in many ways weaker, because even though they had succeeded in creating a state, they were still surrounded by a large mass of Arab nations. And in America, too, even though Jews had made their way into the general society in various ways, they were still prevented from access to all sorts of establishments, both civically, culturally, socially. And it wasn't until after the 67 war where the non-Jewish population realized and recognized that the Jews were going to be now emergent, and that it was acceptable to see Jews and claim Jews as being Jewish, not just as being a people of a heritage from the Bible, but in the modern era to be expressly Jewish in their form. And so this phenomenon affects Jews in all sorts of ways. But one way it affects it is that now we start to consider reclaiming aspects to our heritage which previously might have been considered sort of awkward or very different or Orientalist or just away from the norm. And certainly the idea of a nigun, I mean, think about it. If you were in a Reformed temple, or if you were a secular Israeli, you might feel comfortable in many ways recognizing that your prayers are based in word form, that there's a style or a format to our heritage which involves literature, that involves rationalism. But anything that felt too particularist, too Eastern European, would have been really considered frowned upon, certainly by Zionists, definitely by secular Israelis, but also by the mainstream American Jewish population. And it's not until post-67 that you now have the emergence of these other ways of being Jewish that can now be internalized and pronounced outwardly. Is this making sense? Okay. And so a nigun, you're not going to hear a nigun in an Episcopalian service. You're not going to hear a nigun in a Methodist service, okay? You're not going to hear it in a Catholic service. But it is inherently part of the Jewish background of music, and so we started to be feeling more comfortable identifying with things that were more, for lack of a better word, Jewy. Okay? So we're going to get to nigun in a second, but there's one really famous piece from the play which is not a nigun, which is something else. Avrei Malay Melamed. Melamed.
Avremele, this comes from the name Avram. Avremele, this little boy chick, is the name Avremele. You know, when you grow up, your name is Avram, or you have a nickname like Avi, but Avram, for a little boy, this Avremele, this like a nickname, okay? Like my name, you know, Israel, they call me a Srulik, you know, my parents call him Srulik, you know, this was my nickname, you know. So Avremele is a little boy chick, you know. Little boy chick, and in the show Ish Hasidaya, Avremele was a Shlumiel and Shlemazel.
A what?
Shlumiel.
A shlomiel and a...
Shlemazel.
What's a shlomiel and what's a shlemazel?
The difference between Shlumiel and Shlemazel, the Shlumiel, he spilled the soup, the Shlemazel got the soup and he spends.
That's right.
You know?
Perfect.
So this is a little Shlumiel, Avrem Melamed. So one of the songs from the Ish Hasidaya, once was a Hasid, this one of the famous songs, this about Avremele. Avremele Melamed, Avremele Melamed, Avremele Melamed, Avremele Melamed, Avremele Melamed, Avremele Melamed. Who during the 7 days of Sukkot said the blessing over the citron, over the etrog, and he find out that it was a lemon. Avrei male melamed, 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 Avrei male melamed. Who witnessed the Hanukkah miracle? When he lit the first candle, his house burned 8 whole days. Avrei male melamed, 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 Avrei male melamed. Who married the ugly daughter of the richest man in town just one day before her father went bankrupt? Avrei male melamed, 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 Avrei male melamed.
Okay, so that you know you get a little bit of the style of the maybe the feel of the tenor of the show as a whole, but in terms of the music, obviously that sounds a lot like a Broadway score. That's not any good. So but what really dazzled, what made this musical so well known was not the theme, was not the style, was not those types of Broadway songs. It's what you're about to hear, which was really for the very first time now heard. A nigun was really heard by ordinary people that had never heard of it before.
Ya mama, ya mama, ya mama, ya mama, ya mama, ya mama, mama, ya mama, ya mama, ya mama. Ya mama, ya mama, mama. Ya mama, ya mama, ya mama, ya mama.
Yamama, yamama, mama. Yamama, 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 yamama. Yamama, yamama, yamama. Di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di. Ay, di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di. Bom, bom, bom. Ay, di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di. Ay, di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di. Yom, bom, 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 yom, bom, 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 bom. Ay, di-di-di-di-di-di-di-di. Yo hom bom 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 bom, yo hom bom 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 bom, ay di 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 die, di 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 die, bom bom bom, ay di 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 die, di 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 die, die die die, ay di 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 die, di 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 die, ay di 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 die, di 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 die, die 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 die, ay di 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 die, di 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 die, yom bom 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 bom, yo hom bom 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 bom, ay di 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 die, di 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 die. Yom bom 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 bom, yo hom bom 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 bom, ay di 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 die, di 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 die.
By the way, this nigun became this how the show made so famous, because one of these tunes, Yamama and Aididida, that all Israel,
it was the music.
they sing this in the temple, they sing this in a club, they sing all over this Haididididai. This doesn't mean nothing, but it's a feeling. This is interesting that each tune, sometimes you sing Yamama, sometimes Haidididai, sometimes Yam Bababam. This depends of the feeling of the song. Okay, the Yamama is very sad, and then the Haidididai, happy, joyous. Okay, this depends of the feeling of the song.
And as Godemeyer was saying, that the hope or the aspiration that you don't even necessarily even need to be Jewish to feel connected to the heritage, because it's all about what? It's all about feeling. It's all about what you're bringing in. And there's actually a theologically, or within Judaism, there's a concept that's actually transcends all of this, and it derives out of a concept of Hasidism. And I actually do believe in this. Cantor practices as well. It's called the kavanah of a prayer, meaning that you try to situate yourself in your emotions, in your being, religiously as you're approaching prayer, or as you're approaching a specific prayer. So you're bringing your heart into
the spirit.
The spirit. There's keva, which is like literally like the structure, the ideas, the intellectual component of a prayer. And if you're going to have like a dichotomy, like you have keva, which is the understanding and the frame of the prayer and the what of the prayer, and the kavanah is more of like the feeling. And the niguns, they don't have any keva, they're all kavanah. But bringing kavanah into your other prayers is a good thing too. I mean, like, so Cantor and I Cantor always says you need before the service to really find some time to just relax and prepare yourself and be ready. And when you feel relaxed and prepared and ready for prayer, then everyone does. And I know, Cantor has his own routine that he gets into before leading us in prayer in that way. You're bringing your kavanah into
You have to prepare for the service to be ready to sing. If not, if you come to the service and you're running, and so you're really not ready, because you have to have the feeling of the, special for Kabbalat Shabbat, and you have to focus. I feel myself, if I don't have myself the feeling, the kavanah, I cannot transfer this to the congregation. If I don't feel it, I don't think I can transfer this to the congregation. Okay? But if I feel it, I try. This takes time sometime. This takes time until I feel that the congregation has it. But there's a point that I feel that the congregation get the feeling of Shabbat. And the most important things that if I feel that the congregation get it, I think I did the job. You know, and I feel, especially on Friday night, people have to feel Shabbat. So what's Shabbat? This relax and to feel comfortable and not to be like that.
And so that's a big spirit of Hasidism breathing through into our heritage, not just with the Niguns, but as a whole. So what is Hasidism? Where do these Niguns come from? Where did they emerge? They are actually late on the stage. Let's see, here he is. Here's our friend. This is Israel.
Baal Shem Tov.
Yeah, his name was Israel. Israel ben Eliezer.
Baal Shem Tov, yeah.
Yeah, who is also known as the Baal Shem Tov, which you've heard from before. And by the way, a Baal Shem, his disciples or others could also be called Baal Shems. But he's the architect. He was born in southwestern Ukraine, in a town that I can't pronounce, Okapi, in 1698. And he went on a journey to the Carpathian Mountains and had some sort of experience there. And he came back with sort of a completely a new movement, a new expression of Judaism. In its time, to the town that he came back to, he made his residence, he was really a Kabbalist, which is part of the traditions of Lurianic Kabbalah, which we've talked about before, which really emerged about 150 years before him. But it wasn't so much his theology, it wasn't more of his form, the form in which he took it. And he was so successful in his town that they actually paid him to kind of be the resident Kabbalist who was doing this mode of expression. You know, he was making a living doing this and doing pretty well, and it spread a little bit, but really Hasidism did not take off as a movement in any large, profound way until his disciples. And most of his writings were not, none of them, I don't think, or very few of them, I don't think any of them were, I don't know, I don't think any of them were actually written down. I don't think he actually wrote down any of his wisdom. And just like other times in Judaism, his disciples that he taught to, they then decided to take part of his sayings. So you have sayings of the Baal Shem Tov, these little snippets, they're kind of like Confucius type things, and then they'll expound upon them in terms of actually having literature. But we don't really have too much of his writings. Now, the movement grew and grew and grew in all sorts of areas of Russia, the Ukraine, making its way north and south into this whole domain, Belarus, all the areas that were sort of on the news very much right now, Moldova, all of that really became very focused on Hasidism. And what Hasidism is a construct where there's a belief that through prayer, to the diminishment or the exclusion, the focus more fully on prayer can provide a deeper attachment to God, to the divine, and that God is not just beyond us, but is also in our world, and that by engaging in a connection to prayer, one can reach inwardly and outwardly in terms of a connection to the universe or to the world that we're in, that has an imminent composition that we can access, and that by doing so, in this very pious way of prayer, which is really this, and it's a particular form of prayer, right? It's the niguns. It's this ecstatic type of prayer that you can have something called debakuk or davkuk, which is literally, I have here union with God. Is there another word for davkuk in English? I don't know. Davkuk?
Davka?
Davkuk. Davkuk? Davkuk. Okay, no. Davka is something else. It's a mashracher, yeah. Yeah. So the Hasidim, in Hasidism, there's this construct internally that by doing tefillah, and the Hasids, they talk about this. I've heard Hasids talk about it. I know the word. It's the word I was looking for is adherence, meaning like you're literally, it's almost like, the only thing I can think of as I'm describing is it's literally a physical attachment, meaning like by doing the prayer, you become physically like davkuk. It's like devik. Devik in Hebrew is glue. Okay, so it's literally a way of attaching yourselves to the world through this experience. Well, this did not go over with certain communities, because certain communities said, no, this is not good because it reduces the focus on study, that the true connection to God and to the divine is primarily through the study of Torah. Well, then the Chassid said, okay, that's true. So then they decided in response to say, well, we're not only about prayer, of course we have Torah. It's not davkuk to the exclusion of Torah. But still, if you were to find this, they're challenging one another, and the challenge is really about the form. And it became a major battle between two different ways of approaching Judaism. One was Hasidism, and the other one was called Mitnagdim. And the Mitnagdim were the ones that were much more focused on study as a concentration, whereas the Hasids were much more feeling that through an attachment to this type of expression of prayer, that you could attach yourselves more fully to a union in God. Now, Hasidism became more of as you could expect, more of a popularized form, right? And there's a danger in that, because there's a consideration that in the popularization that people can feel attached to a leader through that emotive experience of feeling connected that is not necessarily based in anything other than that emotional transference. So what starts to happen, and it's not really the theology that becomes a problem, it's the way that it becomes developed and shared. Because what occurs is rather in these Hasidic communities that develop, and this is still in large measure true today, you have what's called a tzaddik or a rebbe. And these become dynastic families. So if your father is a rebbe, you're going to be the rebbe. If your grandfather is a rebbe, great-grandfather, that's how it's passed on dynastically, okay? Rabbinic families don't necessarily work that way. They're not supposed to work that way. That in Rabbinic Judaism, you gain your stature not by who your father or grandfather or great-grandfather is, but by your knowledge of Torah, by your knowledge and wisdom of the scholarship. So the concept that you're claiming your authority through this dynastic heritage becomes problematic in terms of a challenge to the essence, I think, of Rabbinic Judaism, and many would say, of its meritocracy structure. But not only that, when these tzaddiks or these rebbes came into towns, they would say, we are the authority here, not the rabbi, not the cantor, not the shochet, not the other authorities in the town, but the rebbe. And the rebbe would say that because of the interpersonal connection that they shared with their followings, who are attached to one another through davkuk and through these types of expressions, that they could sometimes make miracles even happen. That by having that attachment, that the rebbe would hear and listen to what you had to say, and that there would be an ability through this process to then maybe have a healing or a change of state in a way that was that was not necessarily understood or possible rationally. So you begin to see why this populism, how it spread, because the nigunim are completely acceptable, and it's being offered and elevated through a form that people feel really connected to, and is not necessarily at the pinnacle based out of scholarship or learning. It's based out of something that's more emotive. So these become two dueling forms of Judaism, and eventually what emerges is you have secularism that develops through the Enlightenment. You have Zionism that develops through the development of nationalism, and you also have the growth of socialism. So whether it's socialism, Zionism, or Enlightenment thinkers and secularism, as well as Reform Judaism in Germany and other places, that you start to then see the diminishment of Hasidism, with the exception of a couple of communities that emigrate to the United States. And during the Holocaust, there was a total, because that was another thing, that the Mitnagdim were more open to the idea of their populations migrating. The Hasids were completely opposed to this. It was a totally foreign concentration. And by the way, the other thing about Hasidism, I should say, is that there was total and complete allegiance to the tzaddik, to the Rebbe. And that's still the case today. No questioning whatsoever. So of course they don't want people to leave the fold, and you shouldn't. Also, a lot of times, one of the things that is challenging with a tzaddik or a rebbe is they would tend to take on worldly possessions that was not necessarily consonant with the populations that they would serve. So you see in these constructs more of a cultic type of dimension to them. They were completely, but they're Jews and they're practicing Judaism, and there's a lot in the Baal Shem Tom's readings and literature and offerings, and the Nigunim, which are I think have a lot of good in them. But when I say the Nagdim were really opposed to them, I have a quote somewhere here that the see if I can find it. Yes, this is what the Mitnagdim leader, the Vilna Gaon of Lithuania, said about the Hasidim, that they were rejecting good and choosing evil, and choosing to transgress and change the inherited laws of Judaism, and total hypocrisy in naming themselves as Hasids, which means pious. So when I say these two really did not care for one another,
I think the people has to understand what is the difference between a rabbi and a rebbe. Okay, what is the difference between a rabbi and a rebbe? A regular rabbi can be a rabbi for everybody, okay? A rabbi for all the people. A rebbe he's usually has a Hasidim that follow him, that follow the Rebbe, so he's the Rebbe only for this group of Hasidim. There is about at least 10 group of Hasidim, okay? And one of the biggest Hasidim is the Chabad, okay? This is the biggest group of Hasidim. And there is a different, the headquarters in Eastern Parkway over there in Brooklyn. There is a Gur Hasidim, the headquarters in Jerusalem. There is a Belz Hasidim. There is a Vishnitz Hasidim, the headquarters in Bnei Brak. Okay. There is a Tzanz Hasidim in Netanya, the little small group. So each Rebbe has his own Hasidim that follow this Rebbe, and they don't follow another Rebbe, okay? So this is the difference between a rabbi and a Rebbe, that the Rebbe has his own Hasidim. If it is Vishnitz, it's a Gur, if it is Mozhitz, okay? And and also they have different clothes the way they
Yes,
dress.
that's another thing. Their dress is different.
They dress different, and how you really recognize the difference between the Hasidim. You know, one Hasid has a white socks and put socks on the top of the pants. Some Hasidim has a long coat, some short coat. Some of them, they have a regular black hat. The Chabad is a black hat. They don't wear a shtreimel, you know. Some Hasidim, they have a shtreimel. The Gur Hasidim, they have a big shtreimel, go up like the Russian hat. Some Hasidim, the Vishnitz Hasidim, they have a shtreimel that go very narrow, but go around like that, big around. So this is how you recognize the difference between the Hasidim, the way how they dress. And some of them, they have a gartel, they have a robe, a black robe around, you know, and this is how you recognize.
And yet, despite all the inherent provinciality and particularism and inwardly looking and facing pronouncements and expressions of Judaism that are through Hasidism, that are completely counter to secularism or reform or Zionism, that despite all of this, because of the age of post-67 and because of the desire to reclaim heritage, and because the niguns are, as a form, they are populist, you know, they do connect, that through this play, people then said, okay, we want more of that. And then that's breathed its way into synagogues and into even the secular society. So there was one that you've all heard of, and we use you may have heard of, I think you've probably heard of, and we use his melodies on occasion on a Shabbat. And his name is Carlebach, and Carlebach was actually a follower of one of these Hasidic movements. I don't know if you actually have ever seen Shlomo Carlebach, so I thought I'd give you an actual. And his daughter. Well, his daughter is now, more. She's not a follower. She's more progressive. Goes on for a while. Okay, so we're going to give you a little bit of a taste of how this can be incorporated into liturgy, I think in a constructive way, a little bit different from how we currently worship here at Temple Solel, because frequently what I find is that a lot of times it's Cantor leading the service, and we're engaged with the worship service, but we're not necessarily always singing along with him as a community. Sometimes yes, but a lot of times not. So niguns incorporated and built upon liturgy actually create that opportunity to have a more participatory service. So we're going to give you an example of it. Go ahead. We're going to start with the nigun.
I think you like to have a different song.
Oh yeah, let's do, we're going to do it with Oseh Shalom. Just because of the time, we're going to do it with two, but we're going to do it with, do you have Oseh Shalom up? Keep going. There we go.
So I'm going to start with the nigun. I'm going to start with the nigun, and I'm going to show you that in this nigun, I'm going to use the Oseh Shalom. Okay, you can use a lot of different things. Okay, this nigun usually I sung one of the opening of Friday night service. Okay, you're probably gonna recognize.
Without the guitar first.
Okay, I'm gonna start without the guitar, and this from Lubavitch Hasidim, this nigun. Lai 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 lai
Okay, let's all try it together without the no guitar. No guitar yet. No guitar. Together. Lie, 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 Now I'm going to put this to Oseh Shalom. Just the guitar. Just do the guitar now. Guitar, and then we'll do it.
Oseh Shalom.
Just do the guitar with the nigun. Just do the guitar with the nigun.
Okay.
Yeah. Lie, 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 lie.
Oseh Shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel ve'imru amen. One more time again. Oseh Shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel ve'imru amen.
Lie, 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 lie,
And you know, it's also interesting how are the Hasidim, different Hasid, when they pray, different Hasid move different way. You know, some of the Hasidim sing lai 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 lai. Some of them pray lai 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 lai. Some go like that. Lai 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 lai.
And by the way, it's these affects also find their way into conservative Judaism, into modern Orthodox Judaism. So this, just like we have a nigun that can be incorporated and more broadened out, there's ways of incorporating in some of the aesthetics or the affects of Hasidism into worship services in all sorts of dimensions. So it's just, it's something to just be familiar with. I mean, there are Reformed Jews who will daven and pray just as the way, Cantor was expressing. Many of them aren't in the United States, they're in Israel. Okay, so one more example of how you can do, incorporate in a song with a prayer. So here is the ingathering from the exiles, and I wanted to show the illustration because if you haven't noticed, this happens to be a special day. There's a reason why we chose to focus on how Israeli theater made its way into the popular consciousness of Jews in Israel, then making its way into America, then finding its way into our worship service. That this is a time when we actually sense that the contemporary modes of Israel actually had an influence here in America in our Reform setting. And the reason we decided to focus on it tonight is because what is today? It is Yom HaAtzmaut. Yom HaAtzmaut, the Israeli Day of Independence. So we wanted to do that. And some of you may not know that there's actually a prayer in our prayer book on page 112, which is found as part of the ingathering of the exiles from the four corners of the earth. It's a part of the traditional repertoire that's actually part of the Reformed liturgy as well. But there's a special tune that's incorporated in for many congregations in terms of this prayer. So it's, gather us in peace from the four corners of the earth and lead us upright to our land. For you, O God, work wonders. You chose us truly. You drew us near to your great name that we might acknowledge you, declaring you one in love. Praise be Adonai who chooses your people in love, meaning that the Jews were dispersed after the exile, and there's a prayer always to be able to return to Zion, either as an idea or as a place. And so there's this melody that goes along with this prayer, and I thought of all nights, this would be the night to share it.
Bavienu leshalom me'arba kanefot haaretz v'tolichenu komemiyut le'artzeinu הגדול סלע באמת להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה הגדול סלע באמת להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה.
So, it's just these are ways that wanted to offer it because it would not be unusual or uncustomary in a service to hear. I don't know if we've ever done that. Have we ever done that here? I'm not sure.
Yes.
It has happened. It has happened. Okay, so there's ways that again the expressions, the emanations from Israel find their way and make their way into liturgy. The Nigun is one, Havyenu L'Shalom is one, and we thought, especially on tonight of all nights, we would end with Hatikva, as we ask everyone to please rise.
Yehu קדימה, עין לציון סופיה. עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו, התקווה שנות 2000, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון בירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
So we learned a little bit tonight about a nigun, where a nigun comes from. What is a nigun? We learned a little bit about Hasidism and how it emerged and some of the challenges of Hasidism, some of the aesthetics of Hasidism. We learned about kava, the structure of prayer, and the kavanah, what you bring to prayer. And we also learned a little bit about dabakuk, about this concept that you can, through maybe a focus on prayer in a more deeper, richer way, feel connected imminently to the world around us. I do have to say, just as one other last thought, that if you thought we went through the nigun a lot of times, the practice is usually at least 9 times. That if you go through the nigun 9 times, then you might, the same nigun, you might begin to feel that sense of davkuk. Anyways, thanks to everyone for being here. Please have some wine on your way out.
Happy Yom HaAtzmaut.
And tell your friends, next Wednesday, 7:30.